Hey there guys, welcome back to another Legally Armed America video. Yesterday I played part one of my interview with Ashton Forbes. He's done a lot of investigating on the crashed flight, Malaysian Airlines Flight MH370. Now, to be clear, because comment section is on fire. If you go over there, check it out, watch yesterday's video because the comment section is really good. Pros, cons, people in the middle, it's interesting. Biggest thing that I have, the reason why MH370 has always kind of been on my radar, no pun intended there, is that, as I stated at the end of my video yesterday, when somebody doesn't give me an answer and I know they have it, I wonder why they're hiding it from me. And let's face it, with the amount of technology that the U.S. government and every other government, especially, China is just north of there, all these governments have, or at least claim to have, right? We see some of it on display, but they claim to have all this technology. I think you could hear a frog fart on an island in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and somebody in Washington, D.C. would know it within seconds of the frog passing gas. So I find it really hard to believe that somehow we can't find MH370. That's where I have the question marks. Now, to be honest and to be clear, I'm not implying that Mr. Forbes is correct in his analysis on what happened to the airplane. In fact, I find myself being a pretty strong skeptic. I find myself seeing a lot of what he's saying as, yeah, that makes sense, or, well, that's a better answer than what I'm getting from the governments of Malaysia and the United States. But at the same time, some of it seems just a little bit beyond what my mind can grasp. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not true. Being honest here, I ain't the brightest guy in the world, and at least I'm honest about that. But I'm one of the more curious people in the world. I can admit that as well. And I want to know what's going on with this. And you know what? The whole purpose of putting these interviews out with Mr. Forbes is the fact that I want to generate some independent thought. And if people out there do have answers, we know that some of the islanders out there claim they saw it. I would like to see more people come forward. I hope that more people will come forward and tell us what's going on. You know what, to be honest with you, do we really want to know what's going on? Let's think about it to the level of technology that could exist out there. Do we want to know? But yeah, I guess I kind of do. And I'm sure a lot of you do too. So please definitely give me your comments down below in the video comment section, because I'm very intrigued by you guys, what you think as well, because this is not an open and shut case, so nobody has the final say as far as we go, except for the people who know what happened and they have evidence and proof of that. I'm not saying that Mr. Forbes has that, but I do think that he has some theories that are worth listening to. I want you to listen to this video, this one here, or watch this video. This one here is pretty interesting, and I do ask some compelling questions because my mind is very, very simple. I operate more in a black and a white zone, less gray area in between, so I kind of need some concrete answers, and sometimes I need it simplified for my simple brain. So I hope you'll appreciate my level of questioning to Mr. Forbes, but also I want to, once again, whether he's truthful or not, again, not implying one way or the other, and whether he's right or not, I do appreciate him spending the time with me, because this is a long one. This is part two. I still have a part three. Yesterday's part one was 20-something minutes. This one's like an hour long. Tomorrow's is going to be almost an hour long. So a lot of information that we're putting out there. Again, generate that thought, get it going, and maybe ask some of the right questions. It's clear you've done a lot of work on this, but I don't have an opinion. I don't know or think or care if it's well, I guess I care. If it's aliens, U.S. military, Chinese military. I'm just curious what happened, because I don't think the authorities have, number one, given us enough answers. Number two, they don't seem willing to give us those answers. And anytime somebody's not willing to answer questions, it always makes me wonder why you're not willing to answer those questions.
I want to point out two other things that are great points as well, not to go on a too big side tangent here, but the authority wasn't willing to answer any questions about this. This should have been raising red flags for people. The way the authority and the officials were acting about MH370 made no sense from the perspective of transparency. They weren't being transparent at all. Mm-hmm. They kept saying, too, that we have to wait for the investigation. Imagine you're a family member.
Right.
Your loved one was on a plane that's now just gone.
Right.
And they're going, you have to wait for the investigation. What? Is my family member on Gilligan's Island somewhere? Like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? Tell me everything you know right now. And instead, they just kept saying, we can't tell you anything. We can't tell you anything.
Yeah.
And even weeks later, when you listen to the Minister of Defense, who's the #1 official, he won't answer even basic questions about like when he was informed about the plane disappearing. He won't even answer that because he's so terrified of getting caught in a lie. He won't answer a single basic question about the timeline, about anything that happened, because the whole thing was a cover up from the start, like so obviously. And the last thing I want to say is this: is that I don't care what happened to the plane. I didn't have anybody on the plane. I have no personal connection to the plane. I just came into this because I said, wow, here's 2 crazy videos that might actually explain why a plane inexplicably disappeared in 2014. And I started investigating, and I realized, oh, absolutely there's a cover-up regarding this plane. No question. And there's no way that the United States government doesn't know what happened to this plane. Once I started researching our surveillance capabilities, which I didn't really know much about because I was not a veteran or anything like that, I realized there's literally no way this plane could disappear. Like, it's not possible, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So when you realize that, you're like, oh, so why was the United States lying? Why is the United States not saying what they know about what happened to this plane? And you FOIA request them and you will get rejected for national security and foreign policy. You're like, okay, so we know what happened to the plane.
Right.
And the problem is people will not accept that. They won't accept that we obviously know what happened to the plane.
Okay, so if I'm following your what, as far as what happened, plane took off, there's the possibility that from the moment it took off, there was a plan for this thing to catch fire. And then there was a plan to disappear the plane. And just to tighten up the end of that,
sure.
Do you think, and again, I know you don't know, but do you think the plan was to set the fire in order to redirect it so that they could disappear in the area they wanted to, or did they actually want to set the fire and have it burn and go down? What was the final result that you think they expected?
I think that orbs had to be planned the whole time. The way they were recording it, and the more I learn about the science, the more I'm like, they're recording this for like proof that this is possible.
Yeah,
I think. And to
well, those assets, excuse me, not to cut you off, but are those military assets? And I know you FOIA'd, and I'll show that on screen. Are those assets normally in that area, that region of the ocean?
Well, we don't really know. That's not public information. So, but we have a big presence in in the Indian Ocean at Diego Garcia, because like that's how we check China. You know, that's how we check that part of the world.
Right.
I think the bigger question is, are we tracking all planes all the time? First of all, yes. So for people who are like, oh, do you think we're tracking all planes all the time? Yes, we are. Like, do you understand? Like, AI can do this easily now. They have things that are tracking everything that's in the air all the time. So first of all, yes, we do have that. But for the drone to be in that proximity, the drone to fly under the wake of the plane like that, I mean, the plane flies right past the drone. That's an operation for sure. And then the way the camera is being manually controlled, and at one point you can actually tell that even the drone must the video must be cropped, because the plane goes off the screen on one side. Maybe the right is on this for you guys. And you can tell the operator must still be able to see the plane like off our screen, because when the plane comes back, it's zoomed in now. So they must have been zooming in while they could still see it, while we can't see it there on the side of the screen.
Well, not just that, but the cursor goes off screen too. So that shows
I'm talking about the other video, but yes. So one as well. On that video, it's interesting because we don't see the drone. And you're like, well, this is like a satellite video. It turns out it's just wide area motion imagery, where if you were the operator, you have this software in front of you and you're looking at like a huge field of view. And you can just like press on the screen and it'll zoom up and it'll pop up a window like what we're looking at.
Right.
And then you can move the window around. You can track objects like that. And it's like DVR as well. So it can be live. It can be, and what we're looking at is pre-recorded. We know that because of the mouse cursor. The mouse cursor indicates somebody already knew about this event. They went in, logged into the system. They pulled up the recording of it, and then they tracked it for us, screen recording the window as they were moving the window around. Which I want to point out two things for the people who are the detractors now, who are saying that, oh, these are fake, or that somebody debunked these because I Googled it for 5 seconds. First of all, I'm the expert on these videos. Second of all, there is no such thing as fake military videos to this level of degree. And there's no such thing as any fake thermal video ever to this level, to the level of the degree of the thermal video. For the whammy footage, there's nobody probably in the public sector at all that understood whammy footage in 2014 when these videos were confirmed to be on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And people are arguing with me even now in 2024 and 2025, saying that we didn't have capability like this. And now we know for sure that we did and we do. So think about that from that perspective of, wait, who's the person that made this, that somehow knew about military capabilities that people even now in 2024 and 2025 didn't know about and are arguing don't really exist?
Okay, so let's move on to the how now, since we kind of loosely, and again, I'm basing all this on what your thoughts are, right?
Yeah.
So if there was the potential that the fire was on purpose for whatever reason, just so I understand it, if there was a fire, you mentioned redirecting, was the purpose of the redirection of the flight to get it to a safe location where it could land? Is that what I'm understanding?
I think they're putting it somewhere where they know there's not a lot of eyes on it. Like, imagine you're the CIA and you know where Russia and China's satellites are and their surveillance capabilities. If I'm doing this as an operation, I'm sending that plane somewhere where I'm going to do the zap with the orbs to it. And I'm going to do it somewhere where I know they're not going to have good visibility of it.
Right.
Because I want them to know that we did it, United States Intel, but I don't want them to know exactly how. I want them to be surprised. I want them to wonder how the hell we just pulled that off, right?
So who was the fire for? In other words, if the fire was intentionally ignited in order to have the reason for redirecting the plane, who was that visually for, from an optic standpoint, for somebody to think, they had a fire, so they did this?
The one thing I haven't mentioned is the Freescale Semiconductor engineers on this plane. Guys, there's 20 engineers on this plane from this American company connected to U.S. aerospace and defense. 20. Way too many. They're sitting next to each other. 8 of them are Chinese nationals. Seems pretty clear to me. The only motive that makes sense here is these people were defecting. They had advanced technology in their heads, in the cargo, whatever it might be, and that China was planning on taking these people. And I think the United States just got tired of it, tired of China trying to steal this technology, and said, we're going to set up this plan to make it not happen. So the fire, imagine that you are waiting for these people to land because you're going to black bag them or whatever, right? And the United States is never going to see these scientists again, these engineers. And now all of a sudden the plane is on fire and goes dark. You're just going to start panicking if you're Chinese intelligence, if you're CCP. You're going to be like, our plan is like what just happened, right?
So hold on one second.
Go for it.
Hit the pause button real quick. You've dealt with this for so much. You know all the little small details. I want to make sure we understand as viewers and people who might be new to this. So this flight was on its way to China. So these 20 people, that's correct, right? It was going to Beijing. Is that correct?
Correct.
That was its destination. So you're saying that there were, and that was actually one of my questions later on, who was on the flight? Who was on the flight log? Anyway, excuse me. So these 20 folks were on their way to China. Were they Chinese nationals? Did they work for China, or were they Chinese citizens?
8 Chinese nationals and 12 Malaysian nationals, but they all work for the American company Freescale Semiconductors, or worked.
Okay.
Freescale actually got sold off the next year, surprisingly, under interesting circumstances, since they had $7 billion in debt, and that just got disappeared as well. So there's a lot of sketchiness around this Freescale Semiconductors. They were connected to U.S. aerospace and defense 100% through a contract that's publicly available online. And they had been investigated by the NSA for superconducting microchips in 2005. There's this report that the NSA did about them and other companies that were developing superconducting microchips. So, I mean, to me, it's no question, especially when you start to, if you start to come to this idea that this was some type of state-sponsored event, then it's got to be related to this. And the reason why this would not have been apparent in 2014 versus now is that we didn't understand how significant microchips were in 2014. This was pre-AI.
Yeah.
Now we're realizing Now we got the NVIDIA CEO going on there with this microchip has 10 billion transistors or whatever on it, right? And this is going to power all of AI at a low cost. When you look into the science of how the orbs and the plane got zapped as well, you realize that's also about making things smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. To interact with this quantum energy, you need to get things smaller and smaller and smaller. And the way you do that is microchips. So that's the motive for why this plane is disappearing for sure. Go ahead.
So these guys, I'm talking about the 20 folks, the 12 and the 8. They were going to China. Was it to discuss manufacturing of the chips there, or what was? Do you know what the reason why that they were actually going to China?
We found 2 stories. One story is they were going to upgrade the plants in China, manufacturing plants, presumably. Another story we found when we dug deeper, it was that they were going for a training session in China. So maybe the answer is somewhere in the middle or one of those 2 things. Neither of them makes a lot of sense when you consider that some of them had like their whole families with them on the flight.
Were they mid-level
If I'm going
guys?
on a business trip, go ahead.
Were they mid-level guys, or where did they rank in the? I'm just curious why a company would send 20 people.
Well, let's look at it like this. Freescale themselves said these were very important people during about the plane. That's quoted in the news articles there. These were very important. These were not CXO type people. These were people that would like know stuff about how your business operates, right? Actual get stuff done type people. So yeah, and then but I do want to dispel one false claim out there, which is that there were these 4 people on board the plane and the patent went to the Rothschilds. I think it was Dick Gregory, the comedian, who had pushed this originally, which I think he's right that the plane did go to Diego Garcia. And I think he's right that Freescale is the motive for why the United States did it, but wrong on the exact details. That patent in question, those people were not on board the plane at all. And that's not how patents work anyway. So like if a company has a patent under people, those people don't own the patent. If they disappear, it doesn't change anything about the patent.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, so it's funny because that conspiracy theory is technically wrong, but all the details of like the overall point of the conspiracy theory is correct. Like,
right.
And the people that owned Freescale was super sketch. It was like BlackRock or whatever. I think they're one of those evil corporations. And this company, a lot of people don't know this, they had like $7 billion in debt when they got sold off the next year too. So it's like, honestly, you want a motive? Pick your motive. We've got like 5 different options related to this company that all kind of make sense, you know?
Okay. So we have some, let's just say, some loose ideas of what happened. Now, from a technological standpoint, how did it happen? Because looking at let's forget the trip up to where the fire was. Once the fire took place, and then the recordings that we'll show online, obviously, then the orbs come into play. Tell me about the technology there and the quote, how. I want to know the how of what your thoughts are on how this plane managed.
Demystify this too. It's like for a lot of people that look at it and everybody's mind just goes to aliens right away, and it's scary that we've gotten so secretly advanced that the technology looks alien to us. Our own technology looks alien to us at this point. Because
not to discredit what you're saying, but I don't think that I never once thought aliens. I mean, I've seen plenty of people out there, very high level people, who have said you have no idea the level of technology that the military and the U.S. government and other countries have also, that you wouldn't believe it. It would blow your mind. So no, I'm very much aliens is not what I thought. I thought us or China.
That's important because a lot of people say that. And a lot of people also say, well, the military is decades ahead of the public, but no one ever says, like, what does that look like? What if I were to see that, what would that actually look like? Because we're looking at it. We're looking at it, and we're looking at it. This is something that even the UFO community people, it shakes them to the core. And these are people that are like happy with aliens coming here and psionically messing with you, So, the first thing is the orbs. Right away, we can tell those orbs are plasma. Why can we tell that? Because you can see that they're plasma.
Okay.
It's plasma. It's a plasma field because it's amorphous. You can tell when it's moving around, the shape distorts a little bit, which is another indication that this is not fake. If somebody's faking that, it's just going to be a circle that moves around and never
be
distorts.
easier, right?
Yeah, way easier. Because when it's moving, you can actually tell because it's moving, it kind of like elongates sometimes a little bit. And watch the videos closely and you'll see. And so this was before I even learned the science. I was able to correctly deduce that this is like a superconductive harmonic orb. Superconductive harmonic orb. What do those three things mean? Superconductive is a state of a circuit where the electricity just flows freely with no resistance whatsoever. So currents, theoretically, energy doesn't get used up. If you're not actually like, if there's no inefficiency in your electrical circuit, energy is not getting used up. It's just flowing freely. And if you have a ball of plasma, that can happen in a ball of plasma, just like a lightning bolt. Just like the electricity is just flowing through there freely. It's not going anywhere. And when I say harmonic, what do I mean when I say harmonic? Well, people who understand music will know what I mean. For people who don't understand it, think of a radio. And you have your radio frequency in the old radios where it wasn't just like you go directly to the right channel. You'd have to change your bandwidth. And when you get to the right signal, it goes from fuzz, and then all of a sudden you've got music, right? And you're listening to the music or this person talk on the radio. That is a resonant frequency. You've hit the right frequency and now you hear music. This is also true of like stability in plasma. Look up cymatics, for example. If you take grains of sand and put them on a vibrating plate through different frequencies, they form shapes. Shapes at certain harmonic frequencies, shapes begin to form. So I'm saying that those balls of plasma are able to stay like a ball due to some harmonic waveform, like a standing wave, for example. A standing wave would be like, you guys can see this box right here. Imagine one wave that perfectly fits within this box. Or if I do smaller waves that they just perfectly fit within this box. That's a standing wave. Now, the last bit I said, orbs, plasma orbs. So the plasma orb itself is analogous to fusion research. When we do fusion research, we're trying to contain this ball of plasma. So now we've demystified the orb. The orb is a ball of plasma that is stabilized, that has some harmonic waveform in it that allows it to keep its shape and keep its form. And it turns out when you research this, there is people have researched, they're called ball lightning. They're called exotic vacuum objects, artificially created, stabilized plasma orb. The last thing on the plasma that I'll say is that what is plasma? What even is it? What are we talking about? It's actually so simple. A hydrogen atom, the most abundant element in the entire universe, has one electron on it. So if we take our atom, hydrogen atom, and we take that electron and we rip it off of it, now we have one negatively charged electron over here and one positively charged ion that's missing its electron. We've just created a plasma. You've separated the negative and positive charges. You've created a plasma. You do that on a big scale and you create a ball of plasma. And when we're looking in the orbs in the video, especially the drone video, which is the one that we didn't really want China to see, you see this yellow, like Tesla sign heat signature in the orb. That's the electrons, because the electrons are hotter in that region of the plasma. So we're not looking at a flying saucer. We're looking at a ball of plasma. And the Navy's got that was actually bragging about what they could do with plasma back in like 2020, talking about talking plasma, having plasma talk to you and creating these coherent forms with it. I think they just forgot to tell us that, oh yeah, we can also just have it like float around freely. Now, the other side of it is, what are the orbs doing? What are they actually doing to that plane? Why are there 3 of them? And how are they going like this, like around the plane in a perfect triangle formation the whole time? And to the latter, I would say AI. That was the part where I was like, initially, like, this can't be aliens and it can't be people inside those orbs, because I don't even think the Blue Angels could fly like that. And you realize, oh, this has got to be AI. This is kind of like what Elon's doing now, where he's like landing these rockets on these like toothpicks, basically. But it's like even more advanced than that. So it's probably AI controlling that, which scares me, because does the military have like advanced general intelligence, sentient intelligence, like some type of AI way more powerful than what we have?
And in 2014, no doubt.
Yeah, in 2014, exactly. And maybe like, why have we been building all these quantum computers? Are they doing something with it that we don't really know about? And then the last bit is, okay, so what is happening to the plane? And The big clues at the end. The orbs change their orientation from doing like this to just perfectly vertical around the plane. And then they're just spinning vertically around the plane. And then at the last moment in the thermal video, the biggest clue, the orbs converge on the plane. They actually, like, if you look very closely, they blur for a second, like they're reorienting. And then they just converge on the plane. And the convergence, what's happening in the convergence? The distance between them is being reduced. Well, when you look at the equations in physics, you realize that Coulomb's law is basically the electric force increases exponentially as the distance between two charged objects reduces as they come together. So you're like, are they creating a really powerful electromagnetic force? Because they're just a ball of lightning, a ball of energy, which is itself a very powerful electromagnetic force. And so what they're doing is, they're creating this extremely powerful electromagnetic force, which, according to U.S. Navy engineer Salvatore Pais, can rip through something called the Schwinger limit, which is like we create this force, and then there's this ceiling on reality called the Schwinger limit. And if you put too much electromagnetic force in any area of space-time, condensed enough, and it breaks through that limit, the Schwinger limit, rips through reality, rips right through reality. Okay, shit. If that's what's going on, then to me, that's a wormhole. You're ripping through reality. You're, making a bend between this point and that and the next point. You're basically just like a rubber band. You're saying, okay, go there. Because the point is, that plane's disappearing, but there's no mushroom cloud, no explosion when it disappears. The thing Einstein taught us, E equals mc squared, would say that if you are converting mass into energy, you get a lot of energy out of a little bit of mass. Even this tiny coin that I've got here, this quarter, tiny amount of mass, but can produce a huge amount of energy. So a plane that size, if that was being converted to energy, half the planet would have been destroyed. That's how big that explosion would have been. So it can't be getting annihilated unless it's like some kind of antimatter reaction, which then you would need enough antimatter to make the entire matter of the plane disappear. So what are we left with? It has to be teleportation. It has to be a wormhole or a warp drive. And the last thing I'll say on this is that I thought wormholes were science fiction. I thought, like, the idea that a black hole might be a wormhole was a cool idea, but if you went near it, it would spaghettify you and so therefore not be possible. I started researching the wormholes. I couldn't believe it, but after 2020, this is 6 years after these videos were on the internet, people are writing papers saying that wormholes are humanly traversable, multiple different people. And they're saying that a wormhole is like a black hole, but it doesn't have an event horizon, meaning that it doesn't spaghettify you. It means that you can actually go through it, and it's more just like a doorway. So from the perspective of going through a wormhole, the thing that science fiction gets wrong is it's not like an actual worm opening up and you're like, I'm going to go through it. And then you go through it and there's like blue walls that are glowing and you're in the wormhole thing. That's the part that's wrong. The part that's right is you get zapped on your side. The wormhole opens up like we're seeing in the video. And within a fraction of a second, from the observer's perspective, you're not there anymore. From your perspective, one moment you're here, next moment you've gone through a doorway and now you're instantly somewhere else.
Now your theory is that it is somewhere else, right? That, are you saying the whole jet and all the people just appeared somewhere else? Was it still on fire then? I mean, I know you don't know this, but what I'm saying is,
no, we can
okay,
speculate.
so if you purposely set the fire to disappear the airplane, well,
Yeah.
then you still have a fire on an airplane on the other side of that, right?
Do you though? That's an interesting point. So,
well, the energy, and before you go into your next thought, I'm thinking, of course, you're talking about a lot of energy here. Can the energy put the fire out? But let me ask you this first before we talk about that.
Sure.
How much energy would be needed to even make this happen? I mean, if I'm following you and if I'm tracking you right, and if somebody is in charge of manipulating and managing these three orbs, the amount of energy, what you were talking about the ions and whatnot, that's not a small amount of energy. That's not like a portable battery.
No.
How could you have that much energy in that location and not be visible to anybody, like physically visible to anybody? You mentioned the witnesses that saw the airplane. How could they not have seen whoever was producing that amount of energy to do what you're describing?
Great question. And this is why these are the #1 most secret super weapon in the United States arsenal. Well, this is why the UFO topic is national security. The energy source is the answer. How is it possible that these orbs have enough energy that they can produce a wormhole? From conventional physics perspective, we believe the amount of energy required to produce a wormhole is somewhere on the order of the mass of Jupiter. The mass of Jupiter, which is much, much, much larger than the Earth.
Right.
So we would need energy equivalent to the mass of Jupiter. So we're talking, again, I'm talking, in order to get the energy required to make a wormhole, conventional physics says we need the mass of Jupiter. Okay? Impossible. They'd say it's impossible. But when we look at the Miguel Alcubierre warp drive metric, which is what got wormholes and warp drives started, is that they took Einstein's equations and they said, if we take this to its extreme, can we actually make a warp drive? Can we go faster than light? And they found a loophole. And the loophole they found was negative energy. If they have negative energy, then you can create a gradient like a wave. And then you can just ride the wave and you're not even moving. So instead, the medium is moving, like you being on a conveyor belt. Are you moving when you're on the conveyor belt? No, but you're still moving, right? But you don't feel any of the forces. You would not feel any of the forces of moving. So the answer to your questions is negative energy. Negative energy. And this is the reason why the videos are the most important videos in the world. What color is the zap in the thermal video? It's black. It's black. And we know that black is cold because we can see the engines are red hot in the videos. How can it be cold? Has anyone ever seen a cold explosion before? I've never seen one. I've never seen one recorded. I've never even seen one discussed in a science fiction movie before. What is that? It's an endothermic event. If you Google, like, what are endothermic events, you know what comes up? Black holes. That's weird. So endothermic event is an absorption of energy. It's not a release of energy. An exothermic event would be a release of energy. As far as I know, all human technology is based on explosions, even rockets, right? Everything's based on explosions. So here, we're looking at an endothermic event. It's an absorption of energy. I think we're looking at the first ever video proof of negative energy. And the reason why negative energy just instantly solves the problem, doesn't matter how much energy you need anymore, is because you say you need this huge amount of energy to produce your wormhole. And I say, no, I don't, because I have something called negative energy. And what negative energy does is it literally just subtracts from this side. And I can just keep subtracting, which means I need no energy. And now this is the reason why the real secret of the UFO topic, it's never been aliens, never been aliens. The real secret is free energy.
So tell me again on the how part of it. We've got through the fire and we're up to the orbs. Once this airliner passes through whatever the wormhole or whatever you describe, and again, I know this is your opinion, you don't have obviously proof, but what is your thought on once it got there on the other side of wherever it was going with whatever those orbs were able to produce?
Yeah. And the reason why my sign here says 4 orbs is that my friend Dave Rossi, who's actually a contract engineer with the DoD as well, he actually kind of came up with this theory. He was like, well, maybe there's a 4th orb that determines where the plane goes, and maybe they're entangled to those other orbs. Because if that orb is just a ball of energy, then maybe we use quantum entanglement to link them together, and then you can just, determine where they go. And if it's an endothermic event, an absorption of energy, the whole thing about lithium-ion batteries is that they have this huge amount of energy density in them. That's why the fires can't be put out. They have this predictable burn rate, and you can kind of like set your clock to how it's going to burn.
Right.
but it's not going to go out until it finally runs out of energy.
Right. Right.
But if that event is zapping the energy, could it zap the energy out of the batteries? How crazy would it be if there's a side effect of that zap that actually puts the fire out because it pulls the energy out of the batteries? There's a lot of cases in ghost hunting and alien stuff where like batteries just get drained all of a sudden out of nowhere. So that wouldn't actually surprise me that much. I think that this plane gets teleported somewhere. And I think that the reason the orbs are spinning around the plane vertically at the end is because of the right-hand rule in electrical engineering. The right-hand rule in electrical engineering, I'm trying to find my box. I can't find it at the moment. But you can just imagine like a piece of paper or a box or what have you. And the electric and magnetic fields are always perpendicular to each other, right? Perpendicular. And then also the force field that is produced by the electric and magnetic fields is also perpendicular to both of those. So if I pull this to the side, then this would be another direction to the side here, right? So they're always perpendicular to each other. So this creates something called the right-hand rule in electrical engineering. So you can see now all of them are perpendicular to each other. And you can use this rule to determine, based on the direction of electromagnetic wave, what direction is the force going to be. And one of the details people on social media found out early on was when they took the frame right before the plane, when the orbs are converging on the plane and it kind of like blurs a little bit and the orbs flatten, to the next frame where it looks like this wormhole opens up and you can kind of see the tail of the plane sticking out of the back. It looks like the plane got pulled backwards, which is weird. So if that's the case, this plane might be going backwards. And there's so much evidence in the videos that, remember, we have satellite coordinates. The coordinates change when the perspective changes. We were able to determine the plane's flying to the east based on this. No question, it's flying to the east in that video. So if it's going backwards, it's going to be going to the west. Well, this is really weird because this is where people said the plane went. They said the plane went to the west to Diego Garcia, to the military base there. There were even islanders on a small island. Cuvo Haduvo, I think is the name of the island. 3,000 people on the island. 15 people in the early morning hours see a plane with the red and white stripe of Malaysian Airlines, a jumbo jet, flying low with steam coming out of the back of it, flying south to Diego Garcia. This is the people that live on a small island that don't see jumbo jets. And 15 people that morning saw the plane flying south to Diego Garcia. So what do I think happened? I think they teleported the plane to the west, somewhere in the Maldives. I don't know if they landed it, got people off of it, or bodies off of it, or whatever. Flew it back up, but somehow it got seen by those people on its way to Diego Garcia that next morning. And I also don't know about, like, well, if you teleport a plane or anything, how does time work? Like, can you be teleported to the future? Can you go to the past? How does all that part work? From researching it, my answer is I think you can teleport to the future. Not that you would want to, but maybe you could. Probably can't teleport to the past. And you might be able to be stuck in superposition where they can just, you're not here for a while and then all of a sudden you just kind of appear. So you can take it how you will. I believe that plane appeared pretty instantly afterwards because phones were still ringing for like 4 days. How are phones don't ring if you're at the bottom of the ocean. They don't ring if you're at the planet on the Xenu dimension. They don't ring if you're in the Andromeda or on the moon. So the phones were still ringing. My gut tells me, and my gut's been pretty good in this case, that we've got some weird teleportation tech. Maybe it's alien tech, maybe UFO tech, maybe it's like just Tesla tech and we've been lying about the UFO stuff. I don't know. But that we've got it, but at least in 2014 we had it. And at that time, it wasn't like perfected. Like we were just figuring out this new crazy technology and we were playing around with it and we were confident enough to use it on an airplane, but probably you were going to be able to take that technology to like much more beyond that. Like essentially, like we could have portals. You might be able to have a device on your hand that you press it and now you teleport somewhere, right? In the future.
So I've got two questions based on what you just described. If if it was, to be clear, it's not teleported, in your opinion, to a different time. It's teleported to a different location in the same time, just not there. It's somewhere else. Then, unless, of course, the obvious, it's being covered up, then wouldn't it show up on radar at that other location immediately? Wouldn't a bunch of
What
people who
radar?
had radars, I mean,
Yeah.
have picked that same area? Would it have had the same transponder numbers or identification if it were to be transported, I don't know, 50 miles away or whatever?
So keep in mind, transponder was already off, never comes back on. So this thing never comes back on to the flight radar.
Are transponders ever really off, though?
Well, okay, so there's different kinds. The emergency transponders, the ELT beacons. This is fun fact. You never hear anybody mention this. There are 4 emergency redundant transponders that cannot be deactivated on the plane that only go off during a crash. None of them ever went off. You'll never hear a single YouTuber or other expert talk about this because it indicates the plane didn't crash. There's literally like 4 redundant transponders. That's different than the tracking system for when people are tracking these planes on the internet and what have you. That system completely off. In the Maldives, there's no main radar thing, but also keep in mind, multiple countries had radar of this plane and covered it up, probably at behest of the United States government. At an absolute minimum, Thailand, Indonesia, Australia, and India. At least 4 countries would have seen the plane on radar and have never said anything about it. I mean, it flew right past all of them.
Excuse me one second. When you mentioned the transponder, the one you can turn off, then wouldn't that imply that somebody on the plane was in on the whole thing?
It's an assumption to claim that somebody manually turned off the transponder. Remember, the whole argument that I'm making is that the batteries, we know the batteries were stacked in the forward cargo bay next to the electronics bay. If the electronics bay gets damaged by a fire, everything's going off. And the computer's not turning back on either. Right. One of the absolute insane claims that I don't know how doesn't get more scrutiny is that the computer system turned back on 3 minutes after the Malaysian radar lost contact with the plane. So you're telling me this plane was dark and only Malaysian military radar is tracking it. And then once it gets out of Malaysian military radar, which the person on board the plane cannot know, it's not like you know when radar's hitting you or not. There's not a thing for that on a commercial airplane. All of a sudden, they turn the computer back on to be tracked again. And that's the only reason why we have these satellite pings. It's so obvious that the only reason the computer never turned back on, those are fake satellite pings. Somebody planted those satellite pings to pretend like the computer turned back on, to pretend like this plane flew in the South Indian Ocean. Okay, it's hilariously obvious in retrospect. Anyway, go ahead.
And understand, I'm being a devil's advocate here.
Oh yeah, you're fine.
So, if what you're saying, the computer never came back on, then how did the plane land if it were just teleported 50 miles away? And I'm just using that number arbitrarily. Yeah. If it were teleported, somehow it landed. It didn't land on its own. It didn't float to the ground. If it never came back on because the fire damaged everything, then how did it manage to land? Because you're saying those other ones that would only kick on in the event of a crash did not kick on, meaning it might not have crashed. So how did it land safely, if it landed safely?
You don't need a computer to land the plane. The issue with the plane is twofold. You have no power, so you have no lights. The time of the plane is a midnight flight, and there was no moon that night either. You can check the phases of the moon. It was pitch black. Other than this light from the stars, which, okay, is some, but not much. So the problem with trying to land the plane at Penang is A, it's pitch black out. You also have no lights. Also, you potentially have smoke occluding your windshield. Now, the time that the islanders saw the plane was the early morning hours. Now, this is west, though, as well. So we have to keep in mind the earth moving and time zones and all this. So the hardest thing to explain is actually why is there a gap? There's a several hour gap between when we see the plane disappear and when the islanders are seeing the plane in the early morning hours. Now, since it's the early morning hours, there's going to be light. So landing in Diego Garcia is not a problem after the islanders see it, because it doesn't matter if you have power or not, you've got light. You can see. And if the smoke and the battery fire were out, then you don't have the smoke occluding your windshield anymore as well. So that part's No problem with that. The bigger part is
if the orbs were to absorb the energy to put the fire out, is what you're implying, right?
Yeah, and again, I mean, this is highly speculative, of course, and this is where I would say to people, like, that's why I started with like the strongest evidence, just straight up, because we really need answers from the government on
Sure,
this.
sure.
Like,
No,
I want to know the answers too on why they're doing all this stuff, and like, hey, it would be crazy if those orbs did put the fire out. It actually does kind of make sense, but how can I know that? I can't know. So
guys, what do you think? I mean, I look at it this way. There's some unanswered questions out there, and there are people who know the answer to those questions. And I think until we get at least somebody coming clean with us, all of these questions and supposition that we're talking about here, like from Mr. Forbes and other people on the internet as well, those stories are just going to keep coming out, and they are likely to get wilder and wilder, especially as new technologies evolve, or at least our recognition and observance of those technologies start to become more obvious to us. We're going to be like, that might be what happened to MH370. I'll have part 3, the final part of this interview, 3-part interview, tomorrow. So if you will tune in, at that point, I'll put all 3 of them together, so you're going to have the chance to look at an hour and almost 2-hour-long video once it's all said and done. I will put the entire video out together once we release part 3 tomorrow. So hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America.